listening to LSU Daily with Matt Musso, your home for all things LSU sports.
Off and running here on another edition of LSU Daily. Welcome in and glad to have you with me. We are inside of 48 hours for the showdown in Kyle Field, College Station, LSU and Texas A&M, the last two unbeatens in conference play doing battle. It is sure to be a fire Saturday night. Today, what I want to do is look at the two defenses. There's been a lot of talk about Texas A&M's defense and how good they are. And they are very, very good. One of the best defenses in the country. But how does LSU's compare? And we'll look at one metric in particular, which I believe is the best way to determine your defensive rank. Also, of course, we have our injury report, our first injury report, or whatever the SEC calls it. They don't call it an injury report, but it's an injury report. So we'll run through that on both sides for LSU and for Texas A&M. So buckle in. Glad to have you with me. Thank you for being with me. Be sure to follow me on social media. Of course, like, share, subscribe. Get subscribed to the podcast. Social media, Twitter X, at Musso Matthew. Facebook, you can find me there. And on Instagram, at Matthew Musso1, if you are so inclined. It is greatly appreciated. All right. Let's start with the injury report, and then I'll get into the defenses. So for the injury report, starting with LSU, very positive. The one notable thing that I will point out, Jordan Allen is listed as out for the game against Texas A&M. He was not on the injury report last week against Arkansas, but when looking at that, it's more a hit to your depth. Jordan Allen has not played in LSU's last two games. Looking back through participation reports, it didn't start and didn't get in. You go back, look at the PFF snap counts. They don't have anything for him since week 5. So more or less, that's a hit to your depth right now, but that does matter. You get an injury, to a guy like, say, Dryan or Jordan Gilbert. You have depth pieces behind that still. Deshaun Spears, Kylan Jackson, Major Burns. You could move him obviously back to safety, but just something notable there. That's a new name that has popped up, but also a guy who hasn't necessarily been playing a whole bunch. Chris Hilton listed as questionable. Same thing applies there. Kimo Makanaole also listed as questionable. Was not on the injury report last week. But you've been pretty good up front defensively, especially on the defensive line. Everyone else, probable. Miles Frazier, probable. Great news. Caden Durham, still probable. Greg Penn, probable. CJ Daniels, probable. Of course, Daniels suffered an injury in that Arkansas game late. So good to see that he's probable and ready to go. For Texas A&M, it's also pretty positive. So these two teams are coming in fairly healthy. Just about as healthy as they really could be. Terry Bussey had suffered an injury. He is not listed on the injury report, so he is good to go. Javon Thomas, a defensive back, had suffered an injury. He is not listed on the injury report, so he is good to go. The one to really keep an eye on is Chase Basantis. And Chase Basantis is the Aggie starting left guard. He suffered a lower body injury in the Mississippi State game, did not return, and he is listed as out for the game against LSU. That's the second injury on the interior of their offensive line. Their starting center, Mark Naboo Jr., tore his ACL week 1 against Notre Dame. So they've been playing without Naboo really the majority of the season. They've settled in quite nicely there, but that still is a shakeup on the interior of the Texas A&M offensive line, a team that loves to run the football. So just file that away. I don't necessarily know if it's going to be the be-all, end-all there. Obviously, losing Chase Basantis for this game is big. That's a big blow to them. That's a starter who was also a all-freshman team member in 2023. That's a really, really good player for Texas A&M that they will be without. That is significant. Just file that one away. But everything else for the Aggies, very positive along the injury front. Oh, and I guess I should mention Tyree Adams is out a second week for LSU, but again, he He had surgery. Like that. He's remember Brian Kelly's quote, clearly out. So that kind of goes without saying, but we'll mention it one more time. So no Tyree Adams as well for LSU. Your swing offensive lineman, health up front for the Tigers, going to be paramount this week for sure. Facing a great Aggies defensive front. Speaking of which, let's talk about the defenses, because that's the bigger conversation that I want to have here today. And there's so many metrics that you can measure a defense by. So many. Total defense, you can break it down to passing defense, rushing defense, you can break it down to scoring defense. Personally, I think total defense is a horrible way to measure the success of a team. Total defense is based off of the yards you give up. Bend but don't break is a very real thing. I mean, it's a metric. Yes, it holds value, but it should never be. I hate the phrase total defense, because it doesn't actually. I mean, in a sense, it takes in everything but scoring, so it's not total, right? And then, I mean, look, yeah, you can use passing and rushing defense to see where a team is maybe most efficient, and we've talked about that. A&M's been great at stopping the run. They've struggled at stopping the pass, and they haven't necessarily faced great quarterbacks. Actually, they haven't faced great quarterbacks. I think Riley Leonard's a great college football player. I think he is a great athlete. I do not think he is a great quarterback. Garrett Nussmeier will be the best quarterback that A&M has seen, much like Arkansas last week. That's going to be a key matchup, and we talked a little bit about that earlier in the week. But those are effective. Scoring defense, I think, is very, very good, because that's the objective, right? Is to stop your opponent from scoring. But the metric that I favor a lot when it comes to defense is stop rate. And stop rate is really just what it sounds like it is. You measure stop rate by the percentage of a defense's drives that end in punts, turnovers, or turnover on downs. So in a sense, it's very similar to scoring defense, but it's a little finer. There are a few things that it omits. So in looking at this, and let me be perfectly clear, Texas A&M's defense is awesome. Like they are a perennial top 25 defense this year. They rank in the top 25 in damn near every category, a lot of times top 15 in the country. They're very, very good. Their defensive line is extremely stout with Turner and Stewart. And you have Nick Scorton off the edge, who looks to be a first-round pick at edge rusher. You look at, just the secondary, right, with Will Lee. He's been awesome back there. Linebackers in York and Scooby Williams. Like, a bunch of names we all know. Javon Thomas, who we talked about earlier, like, they're really, really good. And they are better than LSU's defense. They are better personnel-wise. They are better in just about every category. That's objective. Like, I'm not here to debate that. But how much better are they? How close is LSU's defense actually to A&M? And that's where I look to stop rate. What percentage of drives are these defenses getting a stop? Texas A&M, to this point in the season, has a stop rate of 67.7%. That's in all of their games. 67.7%. I know numbers don't always play well, right? In just an audio medium, you can't, you can't see what I'm talking about. You can't actually look at it, but stick with me as best you can and get this. So A&M, through all of their games, 67.7% stop rate. That comes out to 1.7 points per drive. LSU, to this point, has a stop rate in all of their games of 64.2%, which comes out to 1.78 points per drive. They're very close. Now, that's in all of the games. That factors in the FCS opponents. That factors in, the non-Power 5 or Power 4 these days. So, what is it? Power 4. Well, it's not much different. Texas A&M, in their 5 Power 4 games that they've played, has a stop rate of 67.2%, while LSU's is at 63.6. You're still right there in that, right around 4 percentage point difference. Where it gets really encouraging for LSU is the last 4 weeks, when you've really started to see this defense play well. So starting with that UCLA game to now, after LSU gave up the 33 points on the road at South Carolina, which is the most points they've surrendered all year, by the way. In the last 4 games, the last 4 weeks, LSU's defense carries a stop rate of 68%. It illustrates the improvement. That's 4 points higher than the overall season. And when you look at the two teams side by side, they're almost even. It's a major tip of the hat to Blake Baker and to the players on LSU's team, because Mike Elko is a great defensive mind, and that is his defense that A&M is running. And they have better personnel than LSU. But LSU just plays so damn hard for their coach and for their team that they're making up for it. And I know that's been a huge talking point across many different platforms this week. What Blake Baker's getting out of his defense, the culture that he has built, and all of that. I'm not really here to have that conversation because it's been had. I agree wholeheartedly with all of it. The culture's clearly way better than it was last season under Matt House. I'm not here to have the Matt House conversation. That's in the past. You've moved on. You're 6-1 right now and undefeated in the SEC. And with a win against A&M, you're steamrolling towards the college football playoff and Atlanta. So I don't really care about that anymore. What I care about is the turnaround that has happened and them continuing. What I care about is the last 4 weeks where you actually see LSU's defense start to trend up on the ascent, going into a game where they have to be. And when I look at this matchup, y'all, the spot heavily favors LSU. Heavily favors Texas A&M. And all the way. It's at home. It's a night game. They're going to have the blackout. It's sold out. It's going to be wild, crazy, all of those things. They have the better, defense personnel-wise. And sure, it'll probably be tough sledding at points for LSU's offense. And LSU hasn't won there since 2016. In fact, since 2017, the home team has won every game in this series. So there's plenty to like with A&M. But LSU's defense playing better is ultimately what encourages me so much in this game. On offense, LSU's going to score. It might be tough sledding early. Talked about it, y'all. This looks almost identical to the Ole Miss game to me, where A&M has that great front, like Ole Miss did, and arguably A&M might have a better front than Ole Miss does. I tend to think that they do. And Ole Miss was able to bottle up LSU's run game and play coverage. And LSU was content to really kind of sacrifice the run game that night and throw the ball 51 times. And eventually LSU's offense still made the plays and won out. And Ole Miss has a better secondary than Texas A&M does. So, I expect LSU's offense to get points. It might be slow. Slow and steady wins the race for them. But I like Nuss. You have the quarterback advantage in this game. The key is LSU's defense. Can they keep that upward trajectory? Because on this trajectory that they've been on since the start of the season, they're right there neck and neck with Texas A&M in getting off the field, which is the most important thing a defense has to do. And there's a lot of talk about Le'Veon Moss, and there should be. Louisiana kid, by the way. And there should be. He's awesome. Awesome. Second leading rusher in the SEC. Like, real good. LSU's rush defense has been pretty damn good so far this year, too, though. And I mean, that you talk about what's helped them make that ascent. LSU's rush defense actually ranks ahead of Texas A&M's. Not by much, but it does. LSU's allowing 114, call it 115 yards per game. And Texas A&M's right at 116. They're even. The more you look at them, the closer they actually are. LSU allows about 40 more yards through the air than Texas A&M does. But Connor Wegman, while appearing to be very talented and being very talented, has been very, very inconsistent. And while 40 yards sounds like a lot, 40 yards can be 1-2 plays difference. Now, that could matter a whole lot in the game, don't get me wrong. But again, it's closer than you think. And you've seen the emergence of Zy Alexander these last few weeks. The improvement that he has made this season is massive jump. He was targeted one time against Arkansas. He took away an entire side of the field. It's just hard for me to believe that Texas A&M can beat LSU throwing the football just because you haven't seen Connor Wegman have to do that throughout his career. Granted, it's been an injury-riddled career as well, so maybe he hadn't had as many opportunities. But that's still a great unknown in this football game. I know Garrett Nussmeier can beat the other team throwing the football. In fact, I know he's quite comfortable doing that. And LSU's quite comfortable letting him do that. But the Tigers are going to have to be able to run the football and stop the run. That's where this comes down for me. And I think the defense can do it because they are so much closer. I mean, you've seen all the numbers. We've bore it out. They're closer than many people would have you believe to A&M's caliber. And that's not something any of us would have said 2-3 weeks into this season. But those last 4 weeks where they have the stop rate of 68% shows you the ascension that this team is on. And it could not come at a better time. You're getting better where you've been most deficient at the perfect time this year, heading into your biggest game. Let's see if it makes all the difference. I think that it can. And if LSU has kept the same preparation and they go out and take that preparation to the field and make it and contribute it and turn it into performance, I think that it will make all the difference. We'll give you a final preview and a final pick, of course, on the next edition of LSU Daily. Y'all be sure to like, subscribe, share. All of that greatly appreciated. Follow me on social media as well. And be here next time for more on LSU Daily.